Hi everyone, welcome to Byte Size Med, where we talk about quick, bite-sized concepts in basic medical sciences for study and rapid review. This video is on circulation dynamics, and it's part 2, where we're going to talk about resistance. During cardiac systole, the left ventricle contracts, and oxygenated blood enters the aorta. That blood then passes through arteries and arterioles, then through capillaries, where exchange takes place with the tissues. The deoxygenated blood then enters the venules, through the veins, and multiple veins unite to form the vena cava, through which they drain into the right atrium. So this is blood flow through circulation, and the flow is driven by a pressure gradient, which is a difference in pressure between the arterial and the venous end. What opposes flow is resistance, and in this video we're going to go over some stuff in resistance. The flow of blood from the left ventricle and the aorta through the systems and back to the vena cava and the right atrium is systemic circulation. While the blood that flows from the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery that goes to the lungs and comes back via the pulmonary veins to the left atrium forms pulmonary circulation. Now the pressures and resistance in these two circulations are different. Now we're going to try and understand resistance in vessels by using one of the most important equations in fluid dynamics, and that's the flow is equal to the change in pressure into pi r to the power of 4 over 8 eta L. Now if we rearrange this equation, we get resistance, which is 8 eta L over pi r to the power of 4. Eta is the viscosity, L is the length, and r is the radius of the vessel. 8 and pi are constants. So resistance is proportional to viscosity and length and inversely to the radius. But the radius is to the 4th power, so it's a really important factor. A smaller vessel or a constricted vessel will have a high resistance and a low flow. A larger vessel or a dilated vessel will have low resistance and high flow. So resistance is mainly regulated by the smallest vessels. Now you'd think that would be the capillaries. But capillaries have a high number, much higher than any other vessels. So it's actually the small arteries and arterioles that regulate resistance. They have smooth muscles in their wall that are innervated by the autonomic nerves. So when these muscles contract, the vessels constrict, the resistance increases, and the flow reduces. When they relax, the vessels dilate, the resistance reduces, and the flow increases. So this innervation is what regulates flow through circulation by altering the resistance of the vessels. The resistance offered by all the vessels through systemic circulation is the systemic vascular resistance, also called a total peripheral resistance. The flow through the systems is the cardiac output. So the cardiac output will be the change in pressure over resistance. The pressure gradient would be the difference between that in the aorta and the right atrium. So the cardiac output is the difference between the mean arterial pressure and the central venous pressure over the total peripheral resistance. If we rearrange this equation, we get that for total peripheral resistance or systemic vascular resistance, which is the mean arterial pressure minus the central venous pressure over the cardiac output. Now that was resistance in systemic circulation. But the pulmonary circulation has resistance as well. Now, pulmonary circulation goes from the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery to the lungs and then back via the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. So here the pressure difference is between that in the pulmonary artery to the left atrium. So the pulmonary vascular resistance is the pressure in the pulmonary artery minus the pressure in the left atrium over the cardiac output because it's the same flow. But pulmonary circulation has a lower pressure and a lower resistance than systemic circulation. The resistance through vessels is like resistance in a circuit, so vessels can be arranged in series or in parallel. A series arrangement would mean that all the blood flows through each of the vessel systems in the circuit, one after the other. To understand this, consider all the arteries as one unit, all the arterioles as one, and so on. So overall, the blood that goes through the arteries has no choice but to go through the arterioles, then the capillaries, the venules, and the veins. So basically, all the blood has to go through one vessel after another. So we can get the total resistance by adding them up. And remember that the highest resistance is offered by the arterioles. Now that was a series circuit, but consider just the arteries. That forms a parallel circuit. So a parallel circuit means that blood is flowing through different paths at once. So not all the blood goes through each path. This is like how the arteries supply the organ systems. They each get a fraction of the cardiac output at the same time. The total resistance of the unit will be lower than any one of them, and that's because blood has lots of paths to travel through, lowering the overall resistance. So this is calculated as 1 over the total resistance is equal to 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2, and so on, depending on how many paths there are. Now, if there's an additional path, the resistance will reduce further because there's an extra path for blood to flow. If there's one lesser path, there's more resistance. So we're done with flow and resistance, and in part 3, we're going to talk about pressure. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.